A homeless man who survives on raw meat suddenly spat out blood and fell into the river. Dark red blood wound its way down along the current and seeped into the urban veins of Moscow. Overnight, this prosperous city was swept by a strange unknown virus. Those infected one after another developed horrifying mutations, their pupils lost their original color, and they turned into terrifying bloodthirsty monsters. However, to cover up the truth, the upper echelons actually claimed to the public that only a common flu was rampant. A crisis capable of devouring everything was growing crazily under the calm surface. Early morning sunlight had just climbed up the windowsill. Anna woke up suddenly from a nightmare. Her forehead was still covered in cold sweat. Her husband Sergey beside her was woken up by her movement. He was about to reach out his hand to comfort her. His phone suddenly vibrated rapidly. After seeing the content of the text message clearly, his eyes lit up and he hurried to the park. It turned out that his mother-in-law had secretly sent a message, informing him that his ex-wife Irina wasn't there, and had specially made time for him to spend alone with his son Anton. The father and son chased and played on the lawn. But this warmth didn't last long. Irina's figure suddenly appeared in sight. She sharply scolded Sergey for violating the divorce agreement and meeting their son privately without permission. Her sharp accusations poured down like hail. Sergey hung his head and endured it without a word. Just then, a commotion suddenly broke out not far away. A man clutching his chest coughed violently and fell to the ground. People around gathered around one after another. Sergey's mother-in-law hurried over to check on him, and even bent down to give him artificial respiration. No one noticed that the ominous signs surging in the man's rolled-up eyes. This sudden incident interrupted Irina's anger. She dragged Anton and left. Sergey silently watched their backs, then turned around and went home. As soon as he entered the house, he turned on the TV and called his wife Anna over to watch it with him. It turned out that the TV was reporting that a mysterious virus was spreading in Moscow. In the live broadcast room, the host invited an expert to ask about the virus. They had originally intended to soothe the public's emotions through the expert. However, the virus expert made a shocking statement and revealed the horror of the virus to the public, stating that the virus spreads very fast and those infected will develop a cough. Though it is very similar to pneumonia, its symptoms are much more severe. Those infected will have changes in their eyes and will also cough up blood, and will most likely die within 3 or 4 days. Seeing the expert making alarming claims, the host hurriedly interrupted the conversation, stating that there were very few infected people in Moscow, and that people didn't need to worry. However, the expert beside him kept objecting, saying the latest data showed 2,000 people had been infected, and that the government shouldn't hide the public's right to know. Before he could finish speaking, the live TV broadcast was cut off. It seemed things were far from being that simple. At the same time, martial law had been imposed on the entire city, and the military had begun to control the city's entry and exit points. Meanwhile, Irina, who knew nothing about this, was still at work, only to find that many of her colleagues had already put on masks. She quietly went to the bathroom to wash her hands, but heard coughing coming from a stall. She covered her mouth and nose, pushed the door open, and saw the person inside had already lost consciousness. Worried that her son might also be in danger, she went to the school after work. At this moment, a large crowd of panicked parents had gathered outside the school. It turned out that not long ago, an infected person had also appeared at the school. A girl with reddened pupils was hiding in the corner. After the school reported the situation, it was military personnel who arrived. As soon as the personnel in protective suits arrived at the school, they asked the teachers to seal off the entire campus. Later, the soldiers found the infected girl, and after comforting her, they gave her disinfection treatment. When the girl was carried out on a stretcher, her whole body was covered in white powder. A man beside her, seeing his daughter in such a state, hurried to step forward to check on her, but was stopped by the soldier in front of him. He could only watch as his daughter was taken away. By this time, the school was already under martial law. Irina sensed something was wrong, and hurriedly called her son Anton's smartwatch phone. Fortunately, Anton answered the call. Anton had quietly hidden in the storage room. Upon hearing this news, Irina finally breathed a sigh of relief, and quickly made an appointment with her son on a meeting place. However, when they met, they found that the window in front of them was already locked. Anton was too weak to open the locked window. Seeing this situation, Irina signaled for the child to step back a little, then picked up a stone from the ground and threw it at the window. The mother and son finally reunited, but they had no idea that the city was already under military control, and no one was allowed to enter or leave. How would the two of them escape? On the other side, back home, Sergey was suddenly woken up by a commotion in the middle of the night. Worried about what might be happening, he went downstairs carefully to check, only to see a beam of light from a flashlight coming over. He quickly hid behind the wall, ready to hit the person on the head with a stick. It turned out the person coming was his father Pavel. Sergey led his father into the house and introduced him to Anna. In fact, Pavel had come here because he was worried about his son's safety. Sensing something, Pavel loudly scolded Sergey why he was still staying here, even though this was the suburbs. Moscow had already imposed martial law across the entire city. It was obvious that the government could no longer control the spread of the virus. Moreover, when a virus strikes, human nature often can't withstand the test. When people from the city escape, this place will become dangerous sooner or later. Seeing how firm his father was in what he said, Sergey had to agree to leave the next day. Meanwhile, on the other side, after rescuing her son Anton, Irina returned home and dared not go out. She was just a little worried about her mother, since her mother had gone out during the day and still hadn't come back. At this moment, a sudden knock came at the door. Irina glanced through the peephole and saw it was her mother, who had obviously been infected with the virus. Irina was frightened out of her wits and hurriedly shut the door, while the elderly woman outside kept begging her daughter to open the door, but the terrified Irina paid no heed to family ties and simply kept her mother outside. Meanwhile, in the middle of the night, Sergey quietly walked out of the house, planning to go back to Moscow to rescue his son, and told his father that if he failed to come back in time, he should take Anna and leave. After hearing this, Pavel didn't stop him, but the city was now under martial law, and it was simply impossible to get in by ordinary means, so Sergey found a truck driver by paying him, and hid in the refrigerated compartment in the trunk, and in this way, he sneaked through the checkpoint. When Anna woke up, she found the letter Sergey had left, telling her that he had gone back to Moscow to save their child, and asking her not to worry. But now, Anna could only pray that Sergey would be okay. Just then, a noise came from outside. Pavel was also observing with a pair of binoculars, and saw two fully armed men talking at the door of their neighbor Leon. Having sensed the men's identities, Pavel prayed silently in his heart that Leon wouldn't let them in. But Leon didn't have the sense to refuse, and ended up letting the two men into his house. When Marina, his wife, saw the strangers come in, she became alert. Leon explained that they were just conducting a routine check for any infected people, but after entering, the two men revealed their true nature. They kept praising the furnishings in the house, and then started bossing Leon around, with no sign of conducting any inspection at all. By this time, Leon realized something was wrong, and told them to finish the inspection and leave quickly. But the two men had no intention of leaving. Seeing that the situation was getting out of hand, Leon picked up a photo and said he knew some generals in the military, hoping to scare them off with his connections. Before Leon could finish speaking, one of the men knocked him out with one blow. Shortly after, the two men carried off the TV from the house. Paul, who had been watching through the binoculars the whole time, saw what the men were doing. He immediately checked the weapon in his hand to guard against the men coming to harass him. However, the two men, having finished looting, didn't leave after that. Instead, they set their sights on the terrified Marina. Just as they were about to make a move, a strange sound suddenly came from behind them. One man fell to the ground with a look of terror on his face. It turned out to be Leon's daughter Paulina. At this moment, the other robber was unaware of what had happened, and planned to go loot other houses. He went to Sergey's house and skillfully opened the iron gate. Little did he know, Pavel upstairs had already aimed his gun at him. As soon as he stepped inside, Pavel shot him down with one bullet. The loud gunshot also attracted the attention of the other man in the car. He quickly got out of the car to take precautions. Just as Anna was startled, her son Misha suddenly ran out holding a gun, and at this very moment, the man who had been stabbed with scissors in Leon's house wasn't dead, and was now grabbing Paulina by the neck. Seeing that she was about to suffocate to death, the panicked Paulina could only kick her legs wildly. By coincidence, the man was killed by her in self-defense on the spot, and just as Paulina was in a state of extreme panic, Misha arrived with a gun in his hands. It turned out he had rushed out regardless of danger, because he was worried about Paulina's safety. Looking at this person with autism, Paulina had mixed feelings, but fortunately, the crisis was finally over, and seeing the tragic deaths of two companions, the man behind the car finally gave up resisting, and came to Sergey's door to beg for mercy, asking Pavel to let him take his companions' bodies away. Seeing that the man no longer posed a threat, Pavel agreed to his request. Later, everyone rushed to Leon's house to check on the situation. Leon, who had woken up, was filled with regret, never imagining that the world could be so dangerous. If it weren't for Pavel and the others, they would have died a long time ago. But this wasn't the time to dwell on fear. Pavel knew well that the other side wouldn't let this go easily, so they had to leave here quickly, but they still had to wait for Sergey to come back. At this time, after sneaking into the city, Sergey had originally planned to ask the driver to wait for him for a few minutes, but this was a time of high tension. So the driver demanded a higher price on the spot, and remained indifferent no matter how Sergey begged. In the end, Sergey had to give all his money to the driver, to make him wait for 10 minutes, then turned around and ran towards his ex-wife's house. Irina was very happy to see Sergey, but she still checked Sergey's eyes through the peephole first, and only let him in after confirming he wasn't infected. Now, time was of the essence. After hastily packing some things, Sergey took the two of them and headed back But on the way, they saw food scattered all over the ground. It was obvious that the truck had been looted by rioters after he left. When he rushed to the truck, he found the driver had died on the spot. Sergey had to drive the truck himself, planning to sneak through the checkpoint again. But things were not as easy as Sergey had thought. When he arrived at the checkpoint, the soldiers stopped him and asked him to show his permit. Sergey quickly took out his pass. After checking and finding no issues, the soldiers began to scan the truck. Sergey had thought the soldiers would just take a casual look, but the soldiers opened the trunk instead, and after seeing there was nothing in the trunk, they prepared to let him pass. However, just at this moment, the soldier checking the pass happened to see Irina lying there. Seeing that his ex-wife and son had been exposed, Sergey didn't waste any words and rushed out directly. The sudden turn of events caught the soldiers off guard. By the time they picked up their guns to shoot, they could only see the rear of Sergey's car. On the other side, the gangster who had looted Leon's house returned to their base, only to be punished by the leader. His finger was shot off with a single bullet. Then the leader ordered everyone to mobilize and prepare to take revenge on Pavel and the others. At this time, Anna and the others, following Pavel's advice, had already packed their things and were ready to leave at any moment. But Anna hesitated to leave, for she was constantly worried about Sergey's safety. Just as the two were arguing about this, the sound of a car driving came from not far away. Fearing it was the enemy coming back for revenge, everyone hurriedly looked for cover, ready to fight to the death with them. After getting a clear look at the people getting out of the car, everyone finally breathed a sigh of relief. It turned out Sergey had successfully made it back before dawn. Anna hurried over and hugged Sergey tightly. Seeing how affectionate the two were, Irina standing aside was filled with jealousy. She despised Sergey for having fallen for someone else, but she didn't want to kick up a fuss under the current circumstances. Now that Sergey had returned, they planned to leave immediately. After checking the car again, Leon found that the car hadn't been refueled, so it couldn't go far. So he told Sergey to go to his family's warehouse, where he had stored 2 barrels of gasoline. But when Sergey arrived there, he found there were also 2 barrels of gasoline on the shelf. Eager to leave as soon as possible, he didn't check carefully, but randomly took 2 barrels and returned to the car, then poured all the gasoline into the fuel tank. Little did he know that what he had taken was summer diesel fuel. This caused one of their cars to start emitting black smoke. Not long after they set off, they had to tow the car to a nearby gas station. However, Leon, who was traveling with them, had other plans. He quietly hid the tow rope and lied that he had forgotten to bring it, saying he would drive back to get it himself, telling them to wait there. In fact, he wanted to abandon them and take his family to the airport to leave the country alone, but he had no idea that the gangsters had already swarmed into the neighborhood and massacred everyone by then, and were now chasing after them. Rushing back recklessly would be a death sentence for them. Fortunately, halfway there, Marina needed to use the restroom. Leon had no choice but to stop the car and wait, and this little interruption successfully saved Leon's family. Paulina, who was waiting in the car, saw several cars approaching from ahead. She hurried out of the car to warn her father. The people coming were exactly the gangsters chasing them. The leader had seen a photo of Leon's car in the room, and recognized his car at a glance, sensing they might not have gone far. So the leader ordered everyone to search in the woods. Leon's family hurriedly fled and hid under a mound of earth, and the gangsters arrived here at the same time. Just as they were about to be discovered, one of the gang members suddenly spoke up, saying they shouldn't keep chasing. After all, they were just here for money, not just to kill people. But these words enraged the leader, who gave him a severe beating. At this very moment, the other members, who seemed to have endured enough after seeing this, shot and killed the leader on the spot. In the end, the other gangsters left and drove away in Leon's car. In this way, Leon's family successfully escaped disaster. Later, Leon contacted Sergey, saying they had found the tow rope, but that the car had had an accident and told them to come pick him up quickly. Upon hearing the news, Sergey didn't overthink and drove over immediately, only to find that Leon had lied to him. Leon said that if he hadn't lied, Sergey probably wouldn't have come either. This made Sergey very angry, but he had to take them along, and only agreed to take them to the gas station. In this way, the group took the same car to the gas station, and found it was already crowded with people, and all the gasoline had been used up. What was even worse, there was someone here who kept coughing. A woman suspected the person was infected with the virus, and was yelling at them loudly. In a state of extreme panic, one person took out a knife and stabbed the coughing person. This made the situation even more chaotic. Everyone fled in all directions, leaving only Leon's family behind. In the end, Leon went to the gas station shop, and after paying a large sum of money, they managed to get inside. They had thought they would spend the night here, but the gas station owner was no good either. After seeing how beautiful Paulina was, he had evil intentions. He pretended to be kind, holding drinks and asking Paulina to have a drink with him. As the owner walked over, Leon couldn't stand it anymore and stood up to stop him. Directly, seeing Leon's attitude, the owner dropped the pretense, took out a gun, and threatened everyone to get out of the shop. Just as they were at a loss for what to do, Sergey drove back. He still couldn't bring himself to abandon his companions. Seeing how loyal Sergey was, Leon was moved and told Sergey that the owner had stored a lot of gasoline here but refused to take it out, so they came up with a plan. Sergey went to the window and tried to buy some gasoline at a high price. Just as the owner reached out to take the money, Sergey suddenly grabbed him. Then Leon broke down the door with a gun in hand and knocked the owner unconscious directly. In this way, they robbed the gas station, took enough gasoline and drove away in the owner's car. With this gasoline, they followed Pavel's advice and planned to go to a small island called Lake Vigo. Pavel said there was an abandoned boat there, and that he had often gone there for vacations, and that it was a great place to take refuge. So the two groups drove towards Lake Vigo, which was 1,000 kilometers away. On the way, they were blocked by a fire truck. Sergey found the bodies of checkpoint soldiers everywhere here. It was obvious that a battle had taken place here. After confirming there was no danger, Sergey planned to move the fire truck aside, but right after moving the truck, Sergey found the soldier in the back seat was still alive, and was about to step forward to check on him. The dying soldier suddenly lashed out, stabbed and injured Sergey, which caused Sergey to pass out on the spot. The sudden accident threw everyone into a panic, and they hurried to take Sergey away, and found a nearby village to ask for help. The villagers saw the group had guns and had to let them in. Later, Irina stitched up Sergey's wound with a needle and thread, temporarily stopping the bleeding, while Anna went out to get some food, planning to stay here temporarily, and donated some to the villagers as payment. However, a man looked at the many supplies in the trunk, and began to have other thoughts. In the evening, because it was winter and Sergey was seriously injured, he started running a high fever. If there were no antibiotics, he might die from it. Just when everyone was at a loss for what to do, Leon finally found a veterinarian nearby. The veterinarian took out a huge syringe right away. Seeing the big syringe in the veterinarian's hand, Irina felt uneasy and asked if it would work. The veterinarian said it could cure cows, so it would certainly work on humans. After the injection, Sergey's condition improved, which made everyone very happy. But just as they let their guard down, that man suddenly appeared and quietly approached Misha, who was packing things. When Leon returned after seeing the veterinarian off, he found all the food in the car had been looted, and also found Misha, who had been knocked unconscious on the ground. After learning that his supplies had been stolen, he rushed straight into the man's house. The moment he rushed in, they witnessed a terrifying scene. They never expected that the man's entire family had been infected. Their eyes had turned white, and they were eating unknown raw meat in their mouths. At this moment, the infected woman seemed to lose her mind, and rushed straight at Leon. In a panic, Leon had to shoot. Seeing that someone had been killed, everyone had to quickly pack their things and leave, and just as they were leaving, on the other side, an ambulance was suddenly stopped by villagers. After learning that the vehicle was carrying medicine, these villagers, driven by greed, turned into rioters and began to loot the supplies on the ambulance. It just so happened that Sergey and the others passed by here. Everyone was stunned when they saw the tragic scene in front of them. Irina, who couldn't stand watching, picked up a gun and rushed down to rescue the people in the ambulance. Intimidated by the sound of gunfire, the villagers had to flee in all directions. Several people stepped forward and rescued the doctor, but the driver had already been killed. They then hurriedly drove away from here. However, none of them noticed that Anton had run out of the car out of fear. When Anton came back, his family had already gone far away, so he had to go to a nearby village to ask for help, only to see a group of soldiers dealing with the infected people. To prevent the virus from spreading, these soldiers even shot and killed the infected people directly. Just then, the patrolling soldiers also spotted Anton. Seeing them approaching, he turned around, ran into a hospital, and hid under a bed. But he was still discovered by the soldiers. Just as he was about to be shot, a nurse suddenly appeared and rescued Anton. After knocking down the soldiers, the nurse hurriedly took Anton back to her home. Not long after they got back, the soldiers chased after them too. The villagers could only hide in the basement, trembling with fear. Only the nurse's husband, who was drunk, was lying on the bed. The soldiers who came in to search shot him dead on the spot. Hearing the sound of gunfire, everyone's hearts tightened. When they came out to check, they found the man had already died. Staring at the man's body, the villagers knew that sooner or later they would end up the same way, so they decided to resist, and began to train constantly, preparing to fight back when the opportunity arose. On the other side, Sergey and the others finally realized Anton was missing. The anxious Irina blamed all the problems on Anna, but Anna also had no idea where the child had gone. This wasn't the time for infighting. They had to find the child as soon as possible, so they drove back again. But the bridge was already empty. Fortunately, Pavel found footprints in the snow. Everyone hurriedly followed the footprints into the woods, and found that hospital, and inside, they saw corpses scattered all over the floor. Irina was stunned when she saw this scene. She rushed over without hesitation, ignoring the danger, and began searching for her child among the bodies, but found nothing. Just as Irina was crying loudly, a helicopter appeared in the sky and dropped a large number of leaflets, which clearly advertised the government's evacuation plan. Everyone thought that if Anton was safe, he would probably join the evacuation too, so they hurried to the evacuation site, and spotted a little boy's figure through binoculars. Irina rushed over without hesitation, but when she got to the vehicle, she found it wasn't Anton. Sergey asked the soldiers if they had seen a boy in red clothes, and this scene was just seen by the nurse. But at this moment, the soldiers refused to let them leave, and forced them to get in the vehicle for evacuation. Seeing that the soldiers were unyielding, they immediately pulled out their guns to threaten the soldiers, and demanded to be let go. In an instant, a fight was about to break out, as more and more soldiers arrived. Just as Sergey and the others were about to be surrounded, the resisting villagers suddenly launched an attack, taking out their hidden weapons and starting to fight with the soldiers. Finally, they defeated the soldiers. After looting the supplies, the nurse took the initiative to find Sergey and the others, and told them where Anton was. In the end, Anton returned to Irina's side. After a brief farewell, everyone prepared to continue their escape journey. But not long after they set off, Anna suddenly started coughing, obviously infected with the virus. They had to stop and rest nearby temporarily. At this moment, Leon had another idea. After all, Anna was already infected. He didn't want to risk his family being killed by the virus too, so after discussion, they confirmed the location on the map and set off for Lake Vigo first. On Anna's side, the doctor revealed his secret. It turned out that in the early stages of the virus outbreak, he had also come into contact with many patients. All other doctors were infected and died, leaving only him alive, so he suspected he had antibodies. So he used his own serum to treat Anna. After several days of treatment, Anna successfully recovered. On the other side, Leon also ran into trouble on the way. His wife Marina suddenly got a stomachache and was even about to give birth. But in the middle of nowhere, where could they find someone to help with the delivery? He could only keep comforting his wife. Just because of this moment of distraction, the car rolled over to the side of the road. Although the three of them miraculously survived, Marina became mentally unstable because the baby was stillborn. She held onto her baby tightly and refused to let go. But now, with the temperature outside being minus 10 odd degrees Celsius, if they didn't find a place to keep warm, they would die here sooner or later at night. Leon could only drag his wife along, take Paulina with him, and keep walking through the woods, hoping to find a house. When Leon was exhausted, he finally saw smoke from a kitchen chimney not far away. Leon perked up immediately. At this moment, an old lady was in the bathroom, and suddenly heard footsteps outside the door. In this doomsday scenario, the old lady immediately picked up a gun vigilantly, but she was still a step too slow. The door was opened, and Leon had already pointed a gun at her, but he didn't kill her. Instead, he locked the old lady in the basement. In this way, Leon took over the old lady's house, and brought his wife and daughter over. In the middle of the night, while Marina was sound asleep, he quietly took the dead baby away and cremated it, because he knew that if he didn't take it away, his wife would stay insane forever. Little did he know how much danger this decision would bring him. The next morning, Marina found that the baby was gone, and began searching for it constantly around the house. When she ran to the living room, a voice came from the basement telling her the baby was here, and also said that the baby was hungry. Marina crawled over without hesitation and opened the basement door. Not long after, a gun woke the sleeping Paulina up. The old lady had successfully escaped and locked Paulina in the basement too. In the pitch darkness, Paulina found her father who had been beaten in the insane Marina. In this way, the whole family was locked up by the old lady. They hadn't eaten for a whole day and night, and were about to die of thirst. Paulina could only beg the old lady, and finally the old lady threw them a bottle of water. But getting food was not that easy. In this way, Leon and the others became the old lady's laborers, chopping wood and fetching water for her every day. However, in exchange for their hard work, they only got moldy food. But they couldn't escape at all, and could only linger on in the basement. On the other side, Anna, who had successfully recovered, set off for Lake Vigo again under Sergey's leadership. On the way, they happened to see Leon's car lying overturned by the side of the road. There was blood everywhere on the ground, but after searching around, they didn't find anyone. Seeing that it was getting dark soon, they would also freeze to death if they didn't leave soon. They had to get in the car and set off quickly. But Misha, who liked Paulina, refused to do so and vowed to find Leon's family. Just as Sergey was arguing with his son, Misha suddenly had an epileptic seizure and passed out immediately. They had to leave Misha in the car, then drove towards Lake Vigo. Soon they successfully reached their destination. Everyone carried supplies and hurried towards the abandoned ship on the island. When everyone arrived at the abandoned ship, Sergey suddenly found that the door lock here had actually been opened. Obviously, someone had already arrived first. Several people hurried in carefully to check, and found that there were indeed traces of human habitation inside. Soon they found a corpse at the bottom of the ship, and his foot had been sawed off. The doctor suspected that it was very likely stored food by someone. Obviously, the person was a pervert. Not long after, a man returned here and was directly subdued by Sergey. He didn't kill him, only told him to leave quickly. The man could only pack up his companion's corpse, and left the abandoned ship under Sergey's threat. Learned from him that the man had escaped from prison. Originally, there were 10 of them, but because there was no food, many of them starved to death on the way. He survived by eating his companions. When he said this, the man seemed to remember something. If he left the abandoned ship in the wild, he would freeze to death sooner or later. He then turned around and begged pitifully, hoping Sergey would spare him and let him stay with them. But how could Sergey keep such a pervert? Little did he know that the man had already hidden a knife in his hand at this moment. Fortunately, Sergey was vigilant and shot him dead with one bullet the moment the man made a move. Later, everyone buried the two men and began a relatively stable life. However, Misha still thought about Paulina at this time, so a few days later, he ignored everyone's objections, quietly took weapons with him, drove away, and left Lake Vigo, preparing to go back and continue searching. Soon he returned to the scene of the incident, and followed the trail of blood all the way deep into the woods to search. He searched from day to night and finally found a light not far away, and in the room at this moment, Leon was locked on the bed. The lonely old lady was planning to have evil intentions towards him. At this time, Misha accidentally stepped on a bear trap on the road he had just taken. This made Misha almost faint from the pain. Seeing that he couldn't open the bear trap, Misha had to endure the severe pain and use his gun to break the chain on it. The sound of the gunshot attracted the old lady's attention. Taking this opportunity, Leon hurriedly rolled over, knocked her down, then struggled to break the iron frame, rushed over to the old lady, smashed the iron frame down hard, knocking the old lady unconscious, then rescued his wife and daughter from the basement. Later, Leon carefully went to the window to check, and happened to find someone lying outside. When he saw it was Misha, Leon hurried to bring him into the room, and removed the bear trap for him. After a simple treatment, Leon learned from Misha that he had come out without telling everyone, to meet up with the others. Early the next morning, Leon let the old lady out. The group got into the car Misha had driven and headed for Lake Vigo. At the same time, Sergey and his group also encountered a crisis. That night, just as everyone was worried about Misha, who had left without saying goodbye, a violent explosion suddenly came from outside. Only then did everyone notice that it was actually a crashed plane. Sergey and the doctor hurried to check it out, but found nothing inside. Just as the two were on their way back, a foreign pilot suddenly rushed out and held the doctor hostage with a dagger, and his pupils clearly showed signs of virus infection. It seemed the virus had spread to the whole world. The pilot demanded that everyone lay down their weapons, but how could everyone obey him? Just as they were in a deadlock, the doctor took out a scalpel and suddenly slashed the pilot's eye, which allowed him to break free from the restraints successfully. After that, Sergey shot the pilot dead directly, finally putting an end to the crisis. The next day, Sergey, who was fishing, noticed someone approaching them not far away. The incident from yesterday made Sergey very nervous. He hurried to pick up his weapon and stood ready with it in hand. And as the group of people walked closer and closer, he finally saw clearly that it was Leon and his group, who had been missing for a long time. They rushed forward and hugged each other. The two families finally reunited successfully, but just as everyone thought they could settle down, a violent explosion rang out. The boathouse in the distance had burst into flames. Everyone hurried to run towards the abandoned ship, and all of this was seen by the soldiers in the distance. A new crisis was about to arrive. Season 1 of The Outbreak was produced before the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic, yet it accurately previewed the landscape of social collapse triggered by a global pandemic. The fictional deadly virus in the show ravages Russia. Infected individuals die quickly, cities are reduced to ruins, survivors are forced to flee. This high degree of overlap with reality elevates the work from a curious fantasy to a social metaphor, forcing the audience to reflect on whether civilized order is more fragile than imagined. When disaster strikes suddenly, the show abandons supernatural elements and directly targets the core of human nature, clearly demonstrating the dual nature of survivors. The military massacres civilians in the name of epidemic prevention. Rioters kill each other for resources, revealing the expansion of power and barbarism in a vacuum of order. The ordinary heroism of the main character group. Sergey takes a risk to turn back to save his ex-wife. The autistic teenager Misha serves as a unique perspective for the team to observe crises. Father Boris uses homemade vodka to disinfect and treat his son's wounds. These details highlight how ordinary people uphold the faint light of humanity in desperate situations. The show puts forward the idea that the only way out of egoism is altruism. Individual survival depends on group cooperation, such as the main group accepting the neighbor's family to travel with them, and villagers forming a guerrilla group to resist the military, implying that unity is the only salvation in the doomsday. Director Pavel Kostomarov is skilled at using spinning and inverted shots, and cold-toned Nordic wastelands, to create a sense of dizziness and suffocation. The cold misty forests and frozen lakes filmed on location at -26°C serve as a natural backdrop for the test of human nature. Bloody scenes, nudity, and black humor coexist in the show, rejecting the pretense of Western political correctness, such as the military's indiscriminate massacre of civilians, and survivors shooting their companions for gasoline, barely revealing the laws of the doomsday. The value of The Outbreak far exceeds that of an entertaining drama. It is a microscope of human nature, revealing courage in the face of fear, and awakening amid selfishness, it is also a social prophecy, warning us that when disaster tears off the cloak of civilization, altruism is the ultimate weapon for survival. Despite its crude special effects and occasional logical flaws, its raw sense of reality and fearless gaze into the abyss of human nature are enough to make it an indispensable mirror in the post-pandemic era. The only thing we need to do is hold on to our faith and survive. This is not only the creed of the main character group, but also the inspiration the show leaves for all civilized societies.